Hello everyone, I hope you're doing good. Let us start learning about giving and receiving feedback. Now, whenever we are talking about feedback, it becomes very important for us to understand the difference between a compliment, criticism, and then a feedback. So, compliments, they are always positive, but they do not tell us as to how do we improve ourselves. Criticism, on the contrary, is negative, but still it also doesn't tell us how do we improve upon things. Feedback happens to be something that can be a positive remark or a negative remark, and it does help us to know what are our gray areas and how do we improve ourselves. In totality, the topic giving and receiving feedback comprises following subtopics. What is a feedback? That is the first thing that we'll be discussing. Then the effects of feedback, types of feedback that we have, how to give constructive feedback, characteristics to be possessed while giving feedback effectively, how to effectively receive feedback, and characteristics to be possessed while receiving feedback effectively. Now we will be dividing all these topics into two lectures. Few of the portions will be covered in this lecture and the remaining will be covered in the next lecture. Let us now understand as to what does feedback mean. We have already discussed this when we were doing the stages of communication, the evolution of communication, wherein we discussed that till the time we did not have feedback incorporated in the communication process, it was difficult for the sender, for the receiver to get back to the sender for the output that was generated at the receiver's end. Now with the involvement of feedback into that loop of communication, now we can say that communication now is a complete loop, it is a closed loop, and the moment we call it as a closed loop, we would then call it as an effective means of communication, because as it is easy for the sender to give the message to the receiver also can send the whatever the reaction that has been generated after receiving the information that the sender has sent, the that information, that result that is generated as a response to the received information, the receiver can get that particular information to the sender. So this is what is feedback. It is an information about reactions of a product or a person's performance of a task, which may be used as a basis for improvement. So how do we define it as a reaction to product? So I get, suppose I buy a mobile phone and my mobile phone is working good, so I'll write a review on the website, or from whichever site I have bought the mobile phone, I will write my review. So that is my feedback. If I'm feeling good about it, if I'm satisfied, I'll be writing a positive feedback. If I am not satisfied, I'll be writing a feedback which will have negative remarks. If I'm writing a feedback that has negative remarks, but I'm writing that with an intention to improve upon the process, upon the quality, upon the services, it is treated as a constructive feedback. If I'm writing with a bad intention, if I've the product that I've received is good, but I want to demean the website, maybe I don't want something good happening with the people who own that website, so if with that kind of intention, if I'm writing a negative feedback, then it is called as a destructive feedback. Modifications or control of a process or system by its results or effects is something that is happening with the use of feedback. What is it? Receiver is generating a certain feedback upon receiving the information. Now whatever further modifications need to be done so that a desired output is generated. Ultimately, in the process of communication, we want the outcome has to be desired output. What is desired outcome? Whatever the sender wishes the receiver to do after receiving the message that the sender is floating across, till the time we have that feedback, that response, that result, we would not call it as a desired response. So in order to achieve that response which is desired, whatever changes, whatever modifications, whatever controls that we're doing to that particular process of floating the information is something that is called as feedback. This feedback is the response of the audience which enables us to evaluate the effectiveness of the message. Again, this says the same thing in the other way, that whatever the receiver, that is the audience here, has as a response to the information received, This particular response, when given to the sender now knows, yes, that my information has been received. Now if there is no problem, it will be a desired result. If there are problems at the receiving end, then the receiver gives a feedback of that particular thing to the sender does some improvement over it, and then sends it to the receiver again. So this is how we say that it is nothing but a response of the audience. So when an event is a part of a chain of cause and effect, that forms a circuit or a loop. For example, I have a certain message. I am floating this message through an encoder, putting that into a transmission channel. It reaches the destination. There it is getting decoded into the original form, and the receiver is receiving it, and a response is generated. So this is a cause and effect. There is a certain cause, and then because of that cause there is an effect generated, and this cause and effect thing, it causes it forms a circuit, or it forms a loop. This event that is forming a closed loop is called as feedback. Now let us discuss as to what are the effects of feedback. Effects of feedback makes communication meaningful, because unless the sender knows that yes, my message has been received, or unless the sender knows that yes, my message has been interpreted and understood in the same way that I wanted the receiver to understand and interpret it as, it is, the communication will not be called as an effective communication. Now because feedback is helping the sender to know that yes, my message has been well understood, therefore we call it as a thing that makes a component that makes communication meaningful. And because reiterating on the same idea that communication is nothing but making the meaning being understood, this is something that is helping the sender and the receiver both to understand the meanings. Therefore this is something that makes the communication meaningful. It sustains the communication process. If you do not have a feedback, then the communications process would fall. It will not be effective, because the sender would not get to know the shortcomings, or maybe the issues and the problems faced by the receiver. Even if the receiver tries to approach the sender, it will take him a lot of time. At times we require spontaneous impromptu feedback. When the feedback component is not there, the sustenance of the communication process will be something very difficult. Therefore it sustains the communication process, because of which the communication process becomes effective. It tells whether communication is making sense or not, because if you're floating some information across to me and I've not understood even an iota of some of that particular thing, it is not making sense to me. So if the things are not making sense to me, I can go back to you saying that okay, this is not making sense to me. So it is telling the sender that whether the things make sense or not. It helps to plan the future strategies. Whatever response that the receiver is generating, based on that response will be the future strategies made. So this is how the feedback is helping to make the future strategies. Also it completes the process of communication and it makes it effective. As we've said that if we do not have this, then there'll be no means with the receiver to go back to the sender with the response. So it completes the communication process and makes it effective. I have already given an introduction to the type of feedbacks, that is constructive and destructive. So these two happen to be the types of feedbacks. We have two types of feedbacks. One is constructive, one is destructive. For under both, we can have positive remarks and negative remarks. Constructive may also have positive remark and negative remark. Destructive also can have a positive remark or a destructive remark. Now, what we need to understand here is that why a negative remark can be still called as a constructive, and why a positive remark can be called as a destructive feedback. Let us first try and understand what is constructive. So constructive is meant to improve the performance of an individual or a team, and should not be used to tear them down. So constructive, even if you're giving a negative remark to something, or a positive remark for that matter, the intention behind providing that feedback, no matter whether is it positive or negative, a positive remark or a negative remark, the intention behind giving that feedback is positive. It means that the person who's giving the response wants the person who's receiving the feedback to improve on quality, improve on performance. So constructive feedback will be something that will be given with an intention to improve upon the performance or the quality of the individual, or of the product or services. These constructive feedbacks, they instill confidence in people when gently telling them what they could do in future to perform even better. If I ask you, how do I teach? There'll be some of you who will say, yes ma'am, you're good. There'll be some of you who will say that, ma'am, there are certain areas wherein you need to improve upon. And then there'll be a few who would feel that, okay, if we are truthful, then maybe madam will get embarrassed, or she'll get hurt, or maybe it may have some other kind of repercussions on our result. So with that kind of notion, you would not give me a correct feedback, and you would say that, oh no, no, you're perfectly fine. So there, though it is a positive remark that, ma'am, in spite of you knowing what my shortcomings are, if you're not giving my shortcomings to me, still if you're giving a positive remark, it will be called as a destructive remark, because you did not want me to improve. That is the only logic behind it. So this constructive feedback is used by the people who have visionary ideas, who are visionary leaders, because unless I know my shortcomings, I'll not be improving. Unless I improve, I will not become a person who's near equal to a perfect individual. Therefore, constructive remarks, I can have a positive remark as a constructive. If you feel that, ma'am, there are certain areas that are still gray and you must improve upon, it is a positive remark, and it is, you want me to improve as an individual, as a professional, therefore you're giving that particular feedback to me. So this is a constructive remark. Destructive remark, it can, again, as I said, it may be a positive or a negative remark. Positive remark means, suppose there is a person who cracks bad jokes, PJs, always. Now, and that person is very close to you. You don't want to hurt that person by telling the person that you must stop because you don't make any sense. So what you say is, oh no, 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 you're doing good. You must do that, whatever you wish to. Though you wanted to tell the person that you must not, in front of people, you must not, uh, you know, give or speak or tell some PJs or poor jokes, but because you thought that that comment of yours might hurt the person, you said that, to you know, you continue. Now what is the effect of that, you continue, is that in front of whosoever this person, this friend, this close friend of yours is telling that those poor jokes, they are making fun of this person. That would mean that, had you told that person in advance that while you're doing it, people are mocking at you, this person would have either improved his taste of jokes, or he would have not told those jokes to people who mock at him. Therefore, that particular remark from your side, which was in a way positive, it acted as a destructive feedback to that person, because it continued to damage the personality of that person in front of the other people's eyes. So therefore, such kind of feedbacks that mean no good, that are given with a bad intention, are called as destructive feedbacks. So points at these destructive feedbacks, what do? They point at faults and is direct attack on the individual or the organization. In this, no practical feedback or supportive assessment or advice is given. You just tell the person. For example, suppose you tell me that, no ma'am, you're not good. Now unless you tell me what are the areas in which I'm not good, I will not be improving upon. Because in my perspective, maybe I'm good at everything, but in your perspective, because you are at the receiving end, unless you tell me that these are the areas that you need an improvement on, or you only have told me that yes, you need to improve, but where, that you've not told me. Because you haven't told me the where component of that feedback of yours, I will still be treating that as a destructive feedback, because you did not want me to improve. That is why you gave a half or a partial feedback to me. So these are used by playground bullies, because there are people who would not want, who are not your well wishers, who do not want you to progress in your life, who do not want you to improve upon. So such people who do all these kind of things are playground bullies. So the constructive feedbacks are used by visionary leaders, destructive feedbacks are used by playground bullies. Let us now discuss how to give constructive feedback. Now, when providing constructive feedback, one must try to do following things. Now, we'll not be discussing much about the destructive feedback, because in general, you must be not giving destructive feedbacks, because that will not give a good impression about you to the people. Therefore, constructive feedbacks are the only feedbacks that we'll be discussing. And now, having said that, what are the things that you must do while you're providing a constructive feedback? You must focus on the situation, not the person. You should not be giving feedback keeping the person in mind. You need to keep the situation in your mind. Put yourself in the shoes of the other party. Try to analyze that why is the person going wrong? For whichever reason are you compelled to give a feedback, try to focus on that situation which made the person react the way he did. The moment you focus on the situation and not on the person, you'll be able to give a constructive feedback. Comment on the issue, not the person. Again, personal targeting on the person, hitting the person below the belt, is something that has to be refrained from. You only have to give your feedback on the issue, on the problem that persists, and not on the people. For example, the assignment is late, not you are late in submitting this. The moment you say the assignment is late, the person would understand that yes, you're giving a constructive feedback. You want me to give the assignments on time. The moment you say you are late in giving the assignment, the person would feel that you're blaming, aliegating the person, and that thing might not go well into that particular person's system. Therefore, it has to be a generic statement and not pinpointing anybody. Don't make personal attacks. The moment you say you are late means you're making personal attacks. Don't ever do that. The moment you do it would mean that you do not have good intentions. The moment you don't have good intentions, it will be termed as a destructive feedback. Be share how a problem affects you without going on and on about it. You don't have to stretch beyond a certain limit. Just hit the bullseye. Be very precise. Keep brevity in your mind always, because that happens to be one of the principles of communication, the conciseness, right? So compactness. So be compact and concise in your approach while you're giving a feedback. Do not stretch too much on a same thing, because the moment you're stretching on the same thing again and again, you're repeating it, what will happen is the person who's receiving the feedback will lose interest. He would say, okay, he's repeating the same things a number of times, he's already done that, let us not listen to what he has to offer. Therefore, stick to the problems, to providing the solution to the problem without stretching over that problem for a long period of time. Be specific with your feedback, as this will allow the receiver to know what needs to be changed or continued. You do not have to beat around the bush. Bang on, hit the bull's eye is the only key here. Be specific in your approach. You need to be clear and specific. Again, keeping the principles of communication in mind. Be specific means be concise and be clear, so that there is no ambiguity in the person's mind as to what am I supposed to do to improve. And give feedback personally. If you feel that there is some person in a group of friends, or maybe in your peer groups, who's not performing well, make it a point that you talk to that person personally, eye to eye, and not in front of a number of people. Because when you do that, when you talk to that person about the person's shortcomings in front of a number of people, the person might feel offended. The person might have some negative feelings against you, wherein you still meant positive for that person. So therefore, always make it a point that whenever you're giving a feedback on somebody's performance, you always have to give that feedback in a way that it is personally done. Call the person to your chamber, or you can, meet over a cup of coffee, tea, if you have that kind of a relation with the person, and then try to give the feedback, and not in front of a lot of people. Because the moment you personally give a feedback of something about something to the person, it will help you to build a rapport with that person. Your connect also will be improving. Therefore, it is suggested that feedbacks especially about the performances, have to be given one on one. So in this lecture, we'll be only discussing till this point what are the characteristics of giving and receiving feedback, that we'll be discussing in the lecture that follows. Now, just to sum up the things for you, what is giving feedback? You're providing your feedback. What is receiving feedback? You are at the receiving end, and you are taking the inputs from some other party. So while giving the feedback, you need to examine your motivations. The motivation must be always and always positive. Ask for permissions. You don't have to go to the people and say that, okay, I want to give the feedback. Only when asked, you need to give the feedback. If there is nobody asking for a feedback, still if you wish to, then you need to go to the person and ask for the permissions whether can you give a feedback on a certain topic or an issue or not. Prioritize the feedback. If you have multiple things to say, prioritize which one is the most critical and then put it at the very first place. Give specific examples and ideas. At times when we are giving the feedback to people, people don't understand those things. So make sure that while you're giving a feedback, you illustrate it using examples. And check in as in, you always have to check your attitude while you're giving a feedback. Receiving feedback, assume non-defensive, open body language. You don't have to be defensive while you're receiving the feedback, because that feedback is meant to improve you. It is not a hit on you. Receive it with open body language. Body language would mean that it would show to the other party that yes, you're welcoming that feedback. Paraphrase the feedback. Whatever feedback that you've received, you need to paraphrase it. By means, put it in your words. Whatever is your understanding of the feedback that has been given to you, put the things in your words and then rephrase it for the other party, so that you know that this is exactly what the other party had to give the feedback about. Request specific ideas and examples. If at all you want somebody to, or somebody is giving you the feedback and you're not understanding a certain point, make sure that you ask for specific ideas and examples so that it is clear to you as to how do you improve upon. Ask them to prioritize. If there is somebody who is just giving you feedback without prioritizing, you can ask them to prioritize as to which one is that one thing that you want me to improve upon first. Let them do that, and always thank them while they're giving the feedback to you, because only when somebody is giving the feedback to you will you be improving upon. With this, I will end the lecture here. Thank you so much.